إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار ثم أما بعد يقول الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم ولما رأى المؤمنون الأحزاب قالوا هذا ما وعدنا الله ورسوله وصدق الله ورسوله وما زادهم إلا إيمانا وتسليما. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about the believers, the Sahaba in this ayah, and he said وَلَمَّا رَأَى الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. So once the believers saw the Ahzab, the different parties, because at this time they were trying to get rid of the da'wah. They were trying to stop the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam for continuing to spread this da'wah of tawheed, of Quran, of Sunnah, of Deen, of istislam lillah, surrendering ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then in their failed attempt of trying to do this, that they gathered together all these different tribes, the Confederates, and they tried to come together to go against, to attack the Sahaba, attack the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba, to get rid of this deen. And these were the Ahzab, these were the Confederates. And these are all this conglomeration of these different tribes that came together to get rid of this deen. So when they saw these people gathering together, now obviously the normal person, and when we're in a normal state, we would obviously be very fearful and afraid, because as we know in the time of the Sahaba that they were always outnumbered and people were always coming against them. And then, even to the point where, all these tribes come together just to do one thing, is just to get rid of everybody. So you would feel the sense of fear. And, and it will start to make you start to doubt. And the shaitan can get up in your ear and try to start whispering to you to make you afraid more. Because that's what shaitan wants you to do, is he wants you to be afraid. And you forget what you're doing and forget what you're standing up for. But here, this was not the case with the believers here. So when they noticed that all of these people coming against them, all these tribes coming together to get rid of them, what did they say? They said, قَالُوا هَذَا مَا وَعَدَنَا اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَصَدَقَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. They said, instead of bowing down, instead of showing weakness in front of all these people, even though they were outnumbered, they said, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us. This is what they promised us. And they've been truthful in their promise to us. وَمَا زَادَهُمْ إِلَّا إِيمَانًا وَتَسْلِيمًا. So in a state where most of the people will become afraid and start trying to find excuses to leave and start finding excuses not to do anything, to bow down. They said no. They stood up and they said, this is the promise of Allah. This is the promise of His Messenger. And they've been truthful. And it will increase them in Iman. And it increased them in their surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Sahaba, who had already surrendered their whole selves to this deen, surrendered their whole selves to the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they increased in that surrender. And this state where, where most people will not be able to do that. Because it goes back to putting what? Putting our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they know that there's nothing that they could do in this life. No victory is going to come about except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us that victory. We're not going to face any success in this life except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the one that gives us that success. And they understood this. And that's why they did what they did, and they put their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they understood that this was the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then they stood up and they faced the enemy with courage and with no bowing down. And this takes what? This takes strong iman. And with this, their iman increased. And we also see another instance with the Sahaba where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, الَّذِينَ قَالَ لَهُمُ النَّاسِ إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ فَاخْشَوْهُمْ فزادهم إيمانا وقالوا حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل فانقلبوا بنعمة من الله وفضل لم يمسسهم سوء واتبعوا رضوان الله والله ذو فضل عظيم. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions a different incident. And this is the incident when what they call a Badr As-Sughra, in which Abu Sufyan was coming back around and he was gathering up forces to come back and fight against the Sahaba. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about them, الَّذِينَ قَالَ لَهُمْ. So the people, they're trying to put fear in the people. They're trying to tell them, like, look at these people, they've gathered together and they're coming after y'all. فَخْشَوْهُمْ. So you should be afraid. They're saying this to the Sahaba. They're saying this to the Sahaba, so you should be afraid of them, right? فَخْشَوْهُمْ فَزَادَهُمْ إِيمَانًا. But this only increased them in iman, increased them in their stance. They're tired. They just came from a battle. And now here they're going to have to come. Now the armies are swinging back to fight them again. And what do? At this time of being tired, they say, oh no, we're done for the day. No. فَزَادَهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَقَالُوا حَسْبُنَا اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. That is enough for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's sufficient for us. We don't need anybody. We don't need the help of the people. As long as we have the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what do we need from the people? And وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. And He's the best of all that we can entrust our affairs to. If we had to put somebody in control of our affairs, we put it in the hands of the people, what happens? Maybe the people act honestly, and maybe they act treacherously. Maybe they fulfill their oaths, and maybe they go against and then they deceive you and cheat you. But with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll never be cheated. And with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will never be a loser. So they put all their affairs and they said, وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ, that He's the best one that we can entrust our affairs to. And again, they did not bow down. So because this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them their reward. فَانْقَلَبُوا بِنِعْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَفَضْلٍ. That, with this, because of their stance and because of their, standing up in the face of all opposition and everything against them and putting their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَانْقَلَبُوا بِنِعْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ. So they left out with what? With ni'mah, with the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with fadl, and all of the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bestow upon them in this life and the next life. And of course, the best of all bounties, because you say bounties, but they didn't get rich. They didn't end up with big houses and palaces, but the bounties are the bounties of iman and knowledge and righteous actions. And those are the best bounties. And unfortunately, because a lot of us now, we're not putting our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have the money, you have the houses, and you have all the stuff that's from the dunya. These dunyawi bounties, but you don't have the bounty of iman, the bounty of knowledge, the bounty of tawakkul, of putting your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You've lost these things because you're not taking that stance that they took. And this is not just, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about their situation of fighting the enemy. And nobody's asking you right now. We're talking about you and your daily lives when you live in ease, that you have this type of difficulty of putting your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why you live in the situation that you live in. That's why you're mahrum. You try to stand up at night, but you can't stand up at night. You try to read the Quran, but you can't stay consistent. You try to learn the deen, but you just find all these, the hindrances and blockages and everything. Because of what? Because you're not following the path that they were upon. So you're being, asked to put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No enemies coming against you. No enemies like outside your door surrounding the village about to slaughter you. You're here in a time of peace. But you can't put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the time of peace. What are you going to do now when all the atrocities start? when all the wars start, when all the fear really starts. So this is something that we need to work on now. Learning how to put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of our affairs now, when it's easy. Because when we do it when it's easy, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the tawfiq to do it when it's difficult. When everybody else is bowing down and tapping out. And I'm done. But you just keep on going. And you stand up in the face of all the atrocities and all the tribulations and all the trials. And you come out with an increase in iman, an increase in knowledge, and an increase in surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. While everybody else is falling off, falling down. And that's all because we have to go back to the path that they were upon. But we need to start doing that in this time of ease. Don't use this time of ease to be duped and be fooled and to be deceived that you got everything, but I'll do that later. I'll get to that later. Because you need to start preparing yourself for that now, because all these trials and tribulations, they are coming. They are coming. They're standing at the door. You just don't see them yet. So he said, after that, he said, بِنِعْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَفَضْلٍ. So they went out with the blessing of Allah and all of the bounties. لَمْ يَمْسَسْهُمْ سُوءٌ. لَمْ يَمْسَسْهُمْ سُوءٌ. Like no harm ever came to them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected them. Protected their deen, protected their iman, and protected their ability to continue to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and remain in obedience to Allah. Because these kuffar, they were coming to do what? To take that away from them. They weren't trying to take away their dunya. They weren't trying to take away their houses and their farmland and take anything that they possess from the dunya. They were trying to take away their ability to continue to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their ability to continue in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and their ability to continue to call it the tawheed of Allah. That's what they were trying to take away from them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected that. وَلَمْ يَمْسَسْهُمْ سُوءٌ. So they continued on, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected their ability. Now, yeah, they might not become the most richest of people, but Allah protected the most important thing for them, their Ra's al-Mal, which is this deen. And protected their ability to continue practicing this deen and worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way He commanded them to. Then he said, وَاتَّبَعُوا رِضْوَانَ اللَّهِ. And they followed in the path of what? They continued to seek out the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to do the things that were pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَاللَّهُ ذُو فَضْلٍ عَظِيمٍ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has infinite bounties. And He will continue to give those bounties to His servants in this life, with iman, with righteous actions, with obedience, and in the next life with all of the benefits and all the blessings of Jannah. And so this is the path of the believers. Just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى الْحَيِّ الَّذِي لَا يَمُوتُ. This is the path of the believers that we put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We put our trust in Al-Hayy, the one who has ever, is all living, never going to die. But you put your trust in the people. You're not following the path of the Sahaba. You're not following the path of the righteous believers. You put your trust in people all day long. You put your trust in people all day long. But when do you go back to Allah? And when do you put your trust back in Allah? And when do you know that everything that you got in this life, it only came from Allah? It didn't come from the people, and it never will. It never will. So how do you put your trust in Allah? You don't just say, I put my trust in Allah. It's through obedience. When you see yourself in a situation of difficulty, who do you put your trust in? And how do you show that you're putting your trust in Allah? Through His obedience. Through going back to the worship of Allah. If you're slacking in the deen, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts one of those trials and tribulations on you, that you go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you make dua that you know that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can raise this tribulation from you. All the situations that we find ourselves in, how do we show that we're putting our trust in Allah? We go back to the obedience of Allah. We don't do this lip service. We're not a people of slogans. We're not a people of talk. We're a people of action. And the Muslims have always been a people of action. When we became a people of just yippity-yap and lip service, that's when we started failing. And that's when we started going backwards in this dunya. But as long as we were the people of action, and we let other people talk, we let other people say what we were doing, but we just did it. We went back to the obedience of Allah, and we stayed in the obedience. So that's how we show that we put our trust in Allah. But if you're sitting there saying, I put my trust in Allah, oh yeah, only from Allah, but you sit your whole time in the disobedience to Allah, then you're lying. You're lying to yourself. And you're not from the truthful people. The truthful people are the ones that back their words up with action. And you can see it in their lives. You can see it in every way. How are you going to sit here talking about, I put my trust in Allah, and you're oversleeping Fajr? You don't even wake up. You wake up, the sun shining you in your face. You got the urine of shaitan in your ear, and you're talking about, I'll put my trust in Allah. Kadhabtu Allah. Yes, you're lying. How you sitting here talking about, I put my trust in Allah? You never pick up the mushaf. You never read. You never try to learn your deen. So you're lying to yourself. You put your trust in Allah by going back to the obedience of Allah. And this is the only way, because this is putting your trust in Allah. It's such a big thing. The only one that can put that in your heart is Allah. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made you dependent upon the people, what does that say? What does that say about you? But this is the majority of the people and how they live their lives. So we look at another situation. Also where, with the Sahaba, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِذْ هَمَّ طَائِفَتَانِ منكم أن تفشل والله وليهما وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِذْ هَمَّ طَائِفَتَانِ. So two groups amongst the people. And this was in the battle of Uhud, in which two groups, which is Banu Salama and Banu Al-Haritha. What happened was, one of the Munafiqun, they convinced about 1/3 of the army to go and to leave. So they were only a little over 900 in number, fighting against the mushrikeen, who outnumbered them even with those numbers. But then 1/3 of the army said, we're going home. What are we going to fight for? What do we have to do with this? And then these two groups, when they saw the people leave, they started to think, oh, well, we're going to leave with them, because how are we going to win now? We just lost 1/3 of the army. And he said, إِذْ هَمَّ طَائِفَتَانِ مِنْكُمْ أَن تَفْشَلَ. That you're afraid that you're going to lose. And then what did they say? But once they realized, and they woke up, and they realized that no, we got to put our trust in Allah. This ain't about these people. These people aren't bringing us victory. He said what? Wallahu waliyuhuma. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded them that He's their protector, not these people. If we had to put our trust in the hypocrites, and we're going to fail anyways, we're doomed to failure even if they stood there with us. They're going to cause us failure. It's the beauty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls them to leave. Because that's what gives us victory. We can't achieve victory with this sinful people amongst us. So He calls them to leave. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded them that He's their protector. Nobody else. You have no protector in this life. No matter what you think, the only one that can protect you is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. And He said, it's only upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the believers put their trust. Nobody else. Nobody else. And you see the victory that they achieved. Not just the victory in battles, but the victory in the da'wah. That now we're sitting here in America. How many? 1,446 years after they made hijrah. And here we are, calling the people to the Quran and the Sunnah in the belly of the beast. That's victory. That's because they put their trust in Allah. And the only way they were going to continue achieving that is that we also follow the same mannerisms. We do the same thing. This da'wah is only going to succeed is if we follow the path that they were upon. But if we continue to live our lives in the way that we want to live it, or choose the deen the way that we want to choose it, and do things when we want to do them, then we're going to continue to fail. We're going to continue to fail, and we're going to continue to go backwards and backwards and backwards. And then now look at the situation that we're in now. We're in a situation now where the kuffar are not even afraid of the Muslims anymore. Not even afraid of the Muslims anymore. And this has never happened throughout all the history of Islam. But this was promised. And it's promised because just like the Prophet ﷺ said in the last days when he was talking about how the fear of is going to be snatched out of the hearts of your enemy. They're not going to fear you anymore. And the Sahaba said, Ya Rasulullah. He said, is it because we're small in numbers that day? O Messenger of Allah, he said, La, innakum kathir, that you're going to be large in numbers. وَلَكِنْ تَكُونُوا وَشْ غُثَاءٌ كَغُثَاءِ السَّيْلِ. That you're going to be like that foam, that filth, that on the torrential rains, when the valley floods, it picks up all the garbage in the valley. And all that garbage, it washes to the top of the sail, to the flood. And you see all this garbage just on. He said, that's what you're going to be like. You're going to be like the filth that the flood picked up as it was going through the valley. That means no benefit. Because this filth, it brings no benefit to the people. Because we ourselves are not using our lives in benefit. We're wasting our time. You're using your lives for entertainment. You're using your lives to please the people. You're using your lives thinking about what the people think about me. You're not using your life to get closer to Allah, to remain in obedience to Allah. And now look at the situation that we're in. You want to follow the people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put you underneath the feet of the people. But you want to obey Allah and you want to live your life in obedience of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts you and raises you over the people. So look at our situation, and this is the only way that we can change it. And then as we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said, what? He said, وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. That whoever puts his trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient for him. He needs nothing else. He doesn't need to look anywhere else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put everything in place for you if you only put your trust in him. Wallahi, if you only put your trust in him, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put everything in its place, and then you'll start to find help and assistance in places that you never expected to find it. Never expected. The whole time that we were seeking knowledge in Yemen, and we went through all the pain and suffering of hunger, of sickness, our friends getting killed in the different wars that were happening in Yemen. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never left us. And we continued with Iman, and we continued to study the Deen, and we always had food on the table. We never had to sit back and say, oh my God, we're going to starve to death. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always protected us. And that's the only reason why a lot of us can stand here today and say this. Because wallahi, if Allah did not protect us, we'd all be dead. So you have to understand the situation. The only way that we're going to succeed in this life is going back to the obedience of Allah, putting our trust in Allah, and knowing that anything that we want in this life is only going to come from Allah, not from the people. So stop living your life trying to please the people, and start living your life to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَقُولُ قَوْلِ هَذَا وَأَسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهَ لِي وَلَكُمْ وَلِسَائِرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اسْتَغْفِرُوهُ إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونصلي ونسلم على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also in the Quran, He gave the description of the believers when He said, إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم وإذا تليت عليهم آياته زادتهم إيمانا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that the believers, when He gave this trait, this is the description of the believers. He said, first off, He said, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned, وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ, it means that their hearts become full of fear. And that fear leads them to obedience. All right, it's not just simply khawf, that they become fearful of Allah, but it's وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ, that their hearts become full of fear, and that fear pushes them to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the sign of the believers, the first sign, that when Allah is mentioned, this is what happens to them. وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ, and when the ayat of the Quran are recited to them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about إِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا, that every time that they hear the speech of Allah, that their iman increases. And they sit back and they think, okay, now this is what I have to do. And it motivates them to become better and strong and a stronger believer. It motivates them to action. But how many people now, they just listen to the Quran and it changes nothing in their behavior. Changes nothing about them. You read the Quran and it changes nothing. You put the mushaf down and you go straight back out into the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So where is it? Where is it? Where is the obedience? And how are you going to put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if this is the way that you're acting? And then he said, after that he said, وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ, and on their Lord did they put their trust in. They put their trust only in Him. So the sign of the believers is obedience. That they have fear in their heart when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned. And this fear drives them back to surrender themselves to the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not to sit here and justify their sins and make excuses. Oh, yeah, you gotta understand. Yeah, I'm selling alcohol, but I'm only selling alcohol to the kuffar. Yeah. Is that what you want to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with on the day of judgment? You want to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment? You're a Muslim owning a smoke shop, selling all this type of foolishness that you know these kuffar are using it for. You putting your trust in Allah like that? Is that putting your trust in Allah by disobeying Him and getting money that's haram and then feeding your children with that money, putting hellfire into their stomachs? Is that how you put your trust in Allah? Justifying your wrong actions. You put your trust in Allah by going and learning the deen and learning what it is, what obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala truly is. Read through the Quran and read through the Sunnah, but read with tadabbur. Read pondering. Don't just read as an exercise. You sit back and you read the Quran to understand like how I should live my life as a Muslim. You read through the Sunnah and you see that how this is the way that the Prophet ﷺ was, and this is how I'm going to try to be. But you see like now, because you're not teaching this in the households, because again, فَاقِدُ الشَّيْء لَا يُعْطِي. The one who doesn't possess something can't give it. So now look at the children now. The children running around with haircuts like the kuffar, dressing like the kuffar, listening to the music of the kuffar. No semblance of Islam is present on the children that you see today. In fact, they want to be like the kuffar. They don't want to be like the Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They might say it, but again, we're not a people of slogans. We're not a people of lip service. And we're not a bunch of people of all this yippity-yap. We're a people of action. If you truly want to be like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, show it through your actions. Show it through your love for the knowledge and your love for the Sunnah, that you sit back and you try to read every day. You try to read from the Sunnah to see what it is that you need to change in your life so you can be closer to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is how you start to put your trust in Allah. But this is not putting your trust in Allah to continue to disobey Allah and make excuses and justify your actions. And your risk, everything that's provided for you is already written. And it's going to come to you the way it's going to come to you. But you chose a path that's haram. You're going to get your risk regardless. But you chose a path that was haram. And now you took something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wrote for you from the tayyibat. And now you made it from the khaba'ith. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wrote this risk for you, for good. But you chose a path of what? Of evil. A despicable risk. You chose to get your money from things that are haram. So here we see from the hadith of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. And what did he say? He says, سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول لو أنكم تتوكلون على الله حق توكله لرزقكم كما يرزق الطير تغدو خماصا وتروح بطانا. And this hadith is in Sunan al-Tirmidhi. So here, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he said that he heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, if only you put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, haqqa tawakkulihi, in a manner that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a right that you put your trust in Him, which means that you put your full trust in Him. You don't give Him 20%, 30%. No, you give Him 100% of your trust. The people, you don't give them zero if you're going to give anybody. You put all your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, if you put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this manner, the way that He's deserving of you to put your trust in Him, that He will provide for you just like He provides for the bird. The bird leaves its nest early in the morning on an empty stomach, but comes back in the evening what? On a full stomach. Allah provided for that bird. Put his trust in Allah. You leave out of your house in the daytime, in the early morning, and you go to a job or you go to a business that's halal, and you're putting your trust in Allah. But you think that Allah is not going to provide for you? What type of bad thoughts do you have about Allah that you think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is gonna leave you impoverished and hungry and you're staying in the obedience of Allah? You should fear that you continue to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that now that Allah might take it all away from you. And then you might be in a situation that you won't be able to tolerate or stand. But don't ever fear that you remain in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah is not going to provide for you, that Allah is not going to give you the things that you need. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't give you what you want, well, maybe that's a good thing. Because maybe if He had given you that thing that you wanted, you didn't need it, you wanted it, that thing might have been the cause of your destruction. And Allah protected you by keeping that thing away from you. Have good thoughts with Allah. Put your trust in Allah. And know that as long as you remain in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have nothing to fear. But if you continue on in this path of not putting your trust in Allah and continue disobeying Allah, and that should fill your heart full of fear. Wallahu musta'an. اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم ثبتنا على هذا الدين حتى نلقاك به. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. وأقم الصلاة.